The goal of the global elites is world government, and they need a crisis to get the individual nations to yield up their sovereignty to a world governing body. And you understand that globalism is simply belief that the nation state is now obsolete and that the world must move into a system of global governance. And that's clearly stated that globalists believe national borders should be dissolved into a one world government, that a one world government should be instituted. Now, many believe that the world government, that the lack of world government is the reason that Russia and Ukraine, or nation states as a whole, are coming together. They're just going to war to settle their differences, i.e. Russia, Ukraine. They say if there was a fully functioning world governing body, this wouldn't be happening. And so many believe that the nation state has, it's now obsolete. The globalists, or at least this is what they're preaching, the nation state's obsolete and that we should create a global state that answers to a world governing body. If you remember, we talk about Strobe Talbot a lot, but he wrote an article, The Birth of the Global Nation, back in Time Magazine in July of 92, and he actually stated within the next 100 years, nationhood as we know it will be obsolete. The nation states, obsolete, and all states will recognize a single global authority. Now, he's not from China, he's not from Russia, he's not from North Korea, he's from the United States of America. And of course, 2 years later, Strobe Talbot was hired by President Bill Clinton to serve as Deputy Secretary of State, where, of course, he pushed his global agenda until the end of the Clinton presidency in 2001. Bill Clinton was a liberal internationalist or a globalist. So, of course, he's going to hire somebody like Strobe Talbot. And this emerging world government has been promoted for decades. But they realize that the current United Nations, the seat of world government, is powerless to stop conflict, which again was why most nations signed on to the UN Charter to begin with. Now, let me give you a history behind the United Nations very quickly, because you need to understand what length these people are willing to go to and the origin of it, to understand what's going on today and why they want this fully functioning world governing body. The United Nations is the only structure for one world government in the earth today. It was not created to manage the United States or to govern Russia or Israel or South America. No. It was created to be a one world governing body. What's the origin of the United Nations? Well, after World War I. Now again, think about the crises that they're using for world government. It's got to be a global crisis, right? In other words, if it was just Russia and Ukraine, then maybe some nations could get together and go fight like they did World War II. But this is not what they want. They know they have to have a global crisis to create a global government. So, what do we have? World War I. It was also called the Great War. It was the worst war that the world has ever known. Prior to World War I, there had never been a war that even come close to the number of casualties. I mean, World War I ended in just over 8 million dead. And the world said, hey, never again. And it was from this idea, this cry for peace, that the idea to establish a structure for global security was birthed. Hey, because of this world war, we need a world government. And the structure originally after World War I was the League of Nations. Well, the League of Nations was formed in an attempt to assure another world war would never be fought. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, he championed the idea, but the U.S. Congress, they hesitated at that idea because being part of a world government. They read the fine print back then. They obviously don't now. And they didn't want to surrender the U.S. sovereignty, so they voted against this League of Nations. Well, because Woodrow Wilson couldn't carry his own government into the League of Nations, it quickly dismantled and fell apart. And that was the first effort towards a world government because of a world war. But it didn't end there. You're going to see that there was another effort, the second effort, and then eventually I'll show you that there's going to be a third effort according to Bible prophecy.